and share my screen.
Thanks, Sabrina. I will wait a minute or so. Oh. All right, then let's get started. And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining us today for this brown bag. Before we start, I want to make sure folks know that this event is being recorded, and if you would not like to appear in the recording, please turn off your camera. You can also change your name if that is your preference. So I will first, my name is Leonardo Figueroa. I am the chair of the Environmental Policy and Sustainability Management Program. I am very honored to be able to collaborate with Sabrina and our speakers in putting together this brown bag that seeks to connect organizations working in the field with a focus on justice and social transformation. In this case, we have Dee Green, Holly Grove Neighbors Association, Monica Esparza, Renewal of Life Trust, and Megan Lockman from the Land Health Institute. I want to first proceed with the land and territory acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge that the new school is situated on the ancestral land of the Lenni Lenape, the real people. This was and continues to be Lenapehoking, the land of the Lenape. Even as we gather virtually, we gather in relation to so-called New York City, which stands on the stolen and unceded land of the Lenape indigenous peoples who have been dispossessed through settler colonialism and who struggle to this day for the rematriation of their ancestral lands. I ask you to join me in acknowledging the Lenape Nation, their elders, past and present, as well as future generations and the displaced Lenape diaspora, who, notwithstanding settler colonial violence, continue to nurture ancestral knowledge upon which this land was sustainably cared for thousands of years. As we stand on indigenous lands, I also want to honor, respect, and offer our care to land, water, and air, and the elements of Mother Earth that hold life together, especially in turbulent times. I also want to recognize the connected histories and realities of Black and Indigenous oppression, genocide, colonialism, and struggles for liberation in this land. We must acknowledge that the settler colonial project is also a project of white supremacy and racial domination, where institutions of the state and capitalism were founded not just upon displacement and erasure of indigenous peoples, but also the forcible abduction of Black people from their ancestral lands for the purpose of using Black people's bodies for forced labor. Beyond verbal recognition, I call on everyone, including our institution as a whole, to commit ourselves to day-to-day work that dismantles the legacies of colonialism, white supremacy, and systemic racism, as well as patriarchy, and to collaborate to fulfill our responsibilities in materializing liberation, rematriation, and reparations. In line with that mission and purpose, I would like to welcome our folks from Renewal of Life Trust, Land Health Institute, and Holy Grove Neighbors Association. It's a real honor and pleasure to have you in this space. I yield the floor to Sabrina, who will provide some context and introductions. Sabrina Chapa works with me through the Tishman Environmental Center, and she works with the Anthropocene Alliance Environmental Justice Network. Sabrina.
Thank you, Leo. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Sabrina. I'm a Chicana from so-called South Texas, Karankawa land, and I'm coming to you from West Philadelphia, Lenapehoking land. I'm a program manager at Anthropocene Alliance. So basically, whenever any one of our coalition members need something, I'm their point of contact to whatever that connection will be, or resource or service. And I'm also as Leo said, a research assistant for the Tishman Environment and Design Center. I am also a former EPSM alumni, and it's glad to meet y'all and be here with y'all today. Moving forward, I would like to introduce the Anthropocene Alliance Coalition. So the Anthropocene Alliance Coalition is the nation's largest coalition of, I think right now we have about 115 coalition members of frontline communities fighting for environmental and climate justice. So basically what that entails is that we have a very demographically, politically, regionally, and economically diverse community members, more than 100 members across Turtle Island, including 35 communities in so-called US states and territories, including Puerto Rico. Our communities are impacted by flooding, wildfires, heat, drought, colonization, toxic industry, and other various disasters. 75% of our members represent low-income, Black, Latinx, and Indigenous communities. 78% of our community members are women, and 75% are impacted by flooding. Today, I have the honor of introducing Dee Dee Green. Dee Dee is an area program director for American Friends Service Committee's Peace by Peace New Orleans program. She serves on the board of Holly Grove Neighbors Association and Ubuntu Village NOLA, and is a member of the Institutional Review Board for the Institute of Women and Ethnic Studies, IWES. She's been a proud resident of New Orleans since 2007. Also introducing Monica Esparza. Monica Esparza has counseled in land stewardship for 15 plus years. She is a tireless advocate for accessibility to natural resources, food sovereignty, and the economy. Monica has successfully led meaningful stakeholder involvement and capacity building initiatives within ecology, transportation, construction, education, and environmental justice arenas. Her passion for conservation equity service is reflected in works at historic sites such as the Hickory Hill School, Prince Edward State Park, and the African Burial Ground in Richmond, Virginia. Monica is a trustee of the Renewal of Life Land Trust, member of the Virginia Environmental Justice Collaborative and Anthropocene Alliance, as well as a mediator fellow of Habitus Incorporated. Also introducing Megan Lockman. Megan joined the Land Health team as the executive director in 2022. She earned her bachelor's from the College of William and Mary. Her master's degree is in environmental management from Vanderbilt University, and her MBA from Loyola University of Maryland. Megan has experience in environmental consulting and was previously the ED of a watersheds organization in southeastern Pennsylvania. Megan has been a tree hugger since she was a kid in southwestern Virginia. Before it was cool, if she had to choose how she would spend her day, she would prefer to be outdoors, hiking, biking, kayaking, or swimming in the ocean. Please welcome our three guests, Dee Dee, Monica, and Megan. Thank you for being here. Now I will pass it over to Dee Dee.
Thank you very much, Sabrina. Thank you all for being here today and hosting us. I really appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about the work that we're doing in New Orleans, Louisiana. I am, as Sabrina said, I'm the area program director for Peace by Peace New Orleans. It's a program of the American Friends Service Committee, which is a Quaker organization that does peace work both domestically and internationally. We work in partnership with Holly Grove Neighbors Association, which I'm a board member. That's Holly Grove Neighbors, or HNA, is how you might hear me refer to it. It's a civic organization. We were established in 2005, and we essentially are around to inform and engage our neighbors around quality of life issues. We also have, as a neighborhood association, a very firm commitment to promoting sustainability in Holly Grove. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, sorry about that. So Sabrina's showing you some images of the work that we do. I said we are working to promote a sustainable Holly Grove, and the images you see are a reflection of that work. That what that looks like is we manage garden properties in the neighborhood. We have 3 garden properties that we take care of. We also, I wanted to mention that aside from the work that we do in the neighborhood, I was referencing our commitment to promoting a sustainable Holly Grove. And in addition to our participation in Anthropocene Alliance network, we also participate in the Climate Action Equity Advisory Group in New Orleans. It's responsible for creating detailed recommendations on how to implement a climate action strategy in an equitable manner while contributing to New Orleans climate action goals. So back to what our work looks like. We manage garden properties in Holly Grove. Holly Grove is located in the 17th Ward in New Orleans. It's a traditional New Orleans neighborhood, and I'll speak more about what that means in a bit. We also work in partnership with other neighborhood institutions to do this work. We distribute produce from our gardens to residents. We host food shares where we give away the produce. We may work with Black farmers in our region to acquire additional produce, specifically during COVID, so that we can distribute food to our neighbors. We host food shares, we host community cleanups, we cook, we have a, what am I trying to say? We have a fire pit at our garden space. So we often cook the vegetables that we grow in the garden. We fry fish and we give hot plates away. So when you hear me say food share, that's what I mean when I'm referencing a food share. A food giveaway is basically what we do. We're currently working, we've secured some funding to install a community fridge program on one of our garden properties. So the work that we do addresses a few justice issues or issue areas, one being food insecurity. We know that that's an ongoing reality in many communities. COVID, here in the Gulf South, Hurricane Ida have served to exacerbate food insecurity in communities that are already vulnerable. When I say food insecurity, I know you all probably know I'm talking about a lack of access to enough food. Here in Orleans Parish or County, for most folks, we have a population of about 390,000 people. Roughly 18% of people are food insecure. That's about 70,000 people lack access to enough food. And the child food insecurity rate here is 26%. That's in our parish or our county, the county where Holly Grove is. And while this is reason enough to do this work, we also understand how community gardens benefit and green installations benefit the climate and also support a fair and equitable economy. So we know our gardens promote sustainability. We work with our community partners in our commitment to sustainable infrastructure. We've secured funding, as I mentioned, for a solar powered community fridge program that we want to install at one of the garden properties. We've also been discussing installing or raising the money for a solar powered eco bench that we would install on one of the properties. This could be used for used for a charging station, and it uses clean energy and works to retain water. If you don't know, after Hurricane Ida last August, we lost power. Several parts of Southeast Louisiana were without power, some for more than a month. But several weeks we were without power. So the benefits of a charging station are several. We know the community gardens mitigate flooding. If you know anything about New Orleans, we can have a very mild rain event and neighborhoods will flood. So community garden spaces help to manage stormwater. And we also know community gardens reduce carbon emissions. If residents have easy access to to local produce. They don't have to jump in a car, jump on the bus to get fresh groceries. I mentioned that Holly Grove is a pretty traditional New Orleans neighborhood, about 6,300 residents, 85% Black. The average income, household income is about $37,000. And a new 15 square foot home in Holly Grove costs about $300,000. So Holly Grove, like many areas, or New Orleans, I should say, like many cities and urban centers around this country, are turning or being gentrified or have been gentrified. So we, the work that we do, we know that the work that we do also supports, promotes economic justice. So we've taken vacant lots and we're repurposing them right now for food production, but we want to promote economic development. These lots have been vacant since Hurricane Katrina. They haven't been moved into commerce. So we're supporting development that is controlled by a self-determined community. We want to sell produce when we get a high enough yield. We want to sell the produce from the garden properties and help reinvest those dollars back into the neighborhood. And not, we know that land can serve as economic engines for a community. So we're not just imagining food production, we're imagining Black-owned land cooperatives, we're imagining permanent green space and or affordable housing-based trusts. We have secured, or we have purchased through a generous donation one of the garden properties, and we're working now to put it into a community trust. And that is our hope as we continue to acquire properties that we lease from the city for a minimal amount of money. We're able to raise the money to purchase them and put them into a community trust so that they always belong to the neighborhood. So we know that our work is laying the foundation for a local microeconomy that's transformative, one that values people and planet over profit. So I'll give you a little bit about impact, and then I'll tell you the type of support we're looking for to strengthen our program. We've contributed more than 5,100 pounds of produce to families, institutions, and community events in Holly Grove. We've hosted food shares for 990 residents. We've secured, since we've been doing this work, 2015, 2016, we've secured about 150 volunteers who have helped us build beds, clear overgrown lots in the neighborhood, and participate in community cleanups. So usually university students come in and work with neighbors to complete like community or neighborhood beautification projects. After Hurricane Ida at the end of October, we put together a huge cleanup and we cleared about 8 garbage truckloads of garbage. Hurricane Ida took place at the end of August. This was the end of October. So that's how much debris remained in many of the neighborhoods here in the city after that hurricane. And I mentioned that through the generosity of a Quaker meeting in Houston, Texas, Live Oak Friends meeting, we've been able to facilitate the sale and donation of one of the community garden properties to Holly Grove Neighbors Association. And so we're looking for support from students like yourselves. If you're interested, we're looking for someone who can help us scale our work. Again, we want to acquire more properties. We want to grow as much as the neighborhood wants to grow this program. So we're looking for someone maybe with some strategic planning and implementation experience, looking for someone to help us craft language and materials for the neighborhood about climate impacts and how community gardens and green infrastructure can work to mitigate climate degradation. We're looking for someone who will work with us over the course of a year or so to design workshops and interactive events that we can host in the neighborhood that help raise awareness about climate change and how vulnerable communities are and will continue to be the hardest hit without an immediate plan of action. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you all again for listening and having us today.
Thank you very much, Dee Dee. So I guess now we'll take questions for Dee Dee, specific questions. If any of you are interested in the project or any efforts that DD and Holly Grove Neighbors Association and Piece by Piece pursues, let us know now. You could also put it in the chat. We'll also have time at the end of this for some questions later. Does anyone have questions?
Sabrina, I saw one question that said, how can we get involved? Is it okay if I just put my name and contact information in the chat?
Yes, please.
If
All right.
anyone, oh, sorry, Sabrina.
Oh, sorry. You
No,
go.
I was just saying, if suddenly a question specifically for Dee occurs to you, feel free to drop it in the chat and we'll make sure to store all of those if you're worried you're going to forget it when we come back around to questions at the end.
All right, and now we'll pass it on to Monica with Renewal of Life Trust.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you so much to the New School and the Anthropocene Alliance and you, Sabrina, of course, for organizing this event. It's a privilege to be in this space with other coalition members, and thank you all who are here taking the time from your day to hear our stories. As you've heard, my name is Monica Esparza, and I work for the Renewal of Life Trust, which is grounded in the intersections of ecology, economics, and equity, specifically focusing around land trust. Next slide, please. Thank you. We are based in Richmond, Virginia, which is located in the southeastern region of the United States between the Atlantic coast and Appalachian Mountains, and is shaped by the Chesapeake Bay. It's a beautiful state. However, it has Richmond as its capital, which boasts one of the highest cumulative impact cities in the United States. We have the second highest eviction rate in the country, the second highest youth incarceration rate in the country. We have the third highest asthma rate in the country. And this is influenced by chronicles of injustice that go back to the days of its founding. Virginia's population is 8.6 million people. There are 22 Fortune 500 companies here, and this is a state that is very receptive to business, as we have seen with recent legislation to gut citizen review of monitoring air permits in the state. So, to provide a glimpse of what we're involved in, next slide, please. Here's a summary of some of the projects, or specifically 3 areas that I'd like to highlight today, moving forward. Next slide, please. So the first of these is land stewardship that we're involved in. We have offered counseling and education to members of the public and our members for many years. Our organization was actually founded in New York City years ago, but we currently are resident in Richmond, and we work to help address climate impacts and are involved in the Heritage Garden Restoration Project, which is an orchard and bioremediation site at the African Burial Grounds in Richmond. The African Burial Ground serves neighbors, city residents, and tourists who regularly visit the trail, grounds, and shrines for relaxation and ancestral meditation. The garden is a space within the African Burial Grounds, which provides opportunities for visitors to contemplate and reconcile with nature as a means to help bridge human conflict. As a green zone, the project helps to improve park space and quality of life, reduce air pollution and greenhouse gas emissions from nearby transportation. It's situated along the I-95 highway corridor It also assists with flood mediation, stormwater impacts, because it is part of the city's combined sewer system and feeds the homeless. The area also helps to inform, and we use the space to help inform and address the disproportionate environmental impacts on vulnerable communities. And our self-determined partners are devoted to climate change, environmental sustainability, agriculture, land agency, and organizing. Complementing interests in food sovereignty, we are also initiating soil restoration studies with backyard gardens and woodbox farms, involving hemp with an interest to assess areas and cumulatively impact communities for lead and other heavy metals, herbicides, etc. We want to not only bring the soil back to life, but residents who have long been impacted by the war on drugs. And we are presently at the stage of collecting soil samples in key areas, and we'll be planting this spring. We are educators first, and assisting to create a green workforce is a priority, and engage with the Green Lining Institute based in California that helps to develop and train men and women in disciplines related to electric vehicles. Next slide, please. Also, one of our key projects is working with the Environmental Justice Collaborative Mapping Project. And thank you for the lady who's going to put up a link in the chat, hopefully, of the Environmental Justice Map for later referencing. Our interest is to continue to expand this map that we work in related to geospatial data and community health. The map is unique from other maps, such as the recently released climate and economic map of the White House Council on Environmental Justice, because our map highlights community narratives of people who are actually affected by climate change and pollution, which often don't show up on federal or other maps that lack detail about environmental challenges. We recently secured a $100,000 grant from the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality to expand these narratives and expand layers of the map. And I just want to highlight that these communities are people who have had years of experience challenging the status quo, challenging permitting pollution. And they have been involved with many fights, some legal fights, to address things like landfills and pipelines and gold mines, all asphalt plants, and many other challenges that our community has faced. And next slide, please. Lastly, I would like to highlight our involvement with the Disaster Recovery Fund of the Anthropocene Alliance, whereby in the case of disaster, organizations may apply for up to $2,000 in assistance. This is a committee-led initiative, and we're excited to be a part of this also here in Virginia. Next slide. And so finally, in short, to continue to our work in environmental sustainability, climate change, food sovereignty, and land stewardship, our interests can be summarized in the following categories, which include agriculture and bioremediation. Hemp is just a focus area, but we grow all kinds of vegetables with interest to feed the community. We do sell vegetables, but for this particular interest, we are working on hemp research. Additionally, we're interested in people who are able to build out or research health and environmental justice data sets that would contribute to the environmental justice map. that was referenced. We're interested in social justice communication. So in all areas of communication with any of these projects, we can strengthen the communication that we have related to this, which might include writing press releases. It may be including creating videos or other creative means for communication. We're also interested in anybody who might be interested in electric cars or vehicles, and as relates to workforce development, also as it relates to agriculture, of course. And we're also interested in sustainability, planning and development in all realms. We, like I said, are based in Richmond, but we have a statewide initiative. I didn't highlight all of the partners that were involved in here, but we all are working towards land stewardship and environmental sustainability. And lastly, because what is life without joy? If you are somebody who's interested in art, we love that as well, especially because art is an integral part of our work, and we try to continue that thread in all of the things that we do. So I want to thank you all for your time and consideration of our proposal, and that we hope to see you sometime. And of course, if you have any questions, I'm certainly available at this time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. I guess right now, if anyone has any questions that they have off the top of their head, please take yourself off mute or pop them in the chat. If not, we'll go ahead and we'll shift over to Megan. We'll also have time for questions at the end.
Thanks, Sabrina, and thank you to the new school and Anthropocene Alliance. I appreciate the opportunity. I apologize if in the midst of all this, I have some kind of coughing fit. I have the cold that won't leave. So hopefully that won't disrupt too much. As she mentioned, I'm with Land Health Institute. We are based in Philadelphia, and we have basically a three-pronged focus to bring environmental education and urban green revitalization to the area around Philadelphia. The first is our educational focus, and we do this in a variety of ways. Mainly, we want to reach out to anyone who wants to hear. We do work with adults, we do work with little kids, and then we have this specific program we call Profess, which is the Program for Future Environmental Scientists and Stewards. This is run throughout the summer with what we hope to increase into a year-round programming as well. This brings out students within the inner city of Philadelphia to show them that where they live actually is in part of a watershed. These native spots are actually located within the city, not the one you're actually looking at right now, unfortunately, but we do bring them out into not just the parks, but show them how the creeks were underground, what it means to daylight a creek, where they end up, how that impacts you. We do that through a variety of activities. That might be kayaking or canoeing. There's fishing. If you want to go on to the next one, there's some more photos, but we bring them out into the creeks and we show them what it means to do macroinvertebrate sampling, what it means to find that there are things alive in their creeks. And for a lot of these kids, particularly in the public schools in Philadelphia, this is somewhat of a surprise. We continue that with more programming that includes asking them to journal what they're learning. And by the end, we're introducing them to ideas like public speaking and bringing them outside as well. So that's one of our programs, and I'll continue, and you can keep looking at these photos as I go along. Profess is one of them. We have City Wild, which is for younger kids. We also take folks on walks throughout the city on what we call eco walks. We do this weekly. Then we have another program that brings people into our nursery, and I'll continue with our nursery, but one of the groups that comes in there is our Spark program for a daycare for adults. We have school students that come throughout the school year, whether they're interning with us or with a school group. We do bring our Profess kids as well. And we use our native plant nursery really as an educational base, and then we can kind of go out from there. So the other piece of what we do is our revitalization programming. whether that is a vacant lot or finding a neighborhood community that is specifically wants us to come in and create certain types of vegetable gardens, or talk to them about bees and birds and native plants. And so we use our nursery to source the actual plants for those programs, as well as some of the retail. So kind of this three-pronged programming of education, native plant restoration, and greening of the urban environment, and then our nursery itself interweave together in a variety of ways. And for now, what we're really trying to do, we've only been around since about 2014. We have this nursery, which is actually a very interesting space. It's on what was a rail yard. And we've been in this space for about 5 years now. And the improvement over the last 5 years is pretty impressive, but we do still deal with the fact that 2 inches below what is the quote unquote soil is really just post-industrial rubble. But we have all these spaces, and what we try to do is scale up. We are a relatively new organization, and all of our growth to this date has truly been organic. It has been finding the communities, asking them what they need, trying to make those connections. And so really, I think what we need moving forward is to identify new ways to meet more people and to find out what more people need. And I can see that through a variety of different ways. That could be, a nursery business development plan. That could be creating those community connections, finding creative ways to meet new people, to find new organizations, to really create that organic development, but in a way that, with our extremely limited resources that we have in our very small organization, and by small, I mean, I'm really the only employee. We have co-op students through Drexel University who rotate through with us, and we have dedicated volunteers that come as well. But with such a small regular staff group, we are always looking for pretty much any help we can get in any way. So I know that was brief, but hopefully if you have any questions, you'll feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, Megan. Well, that concludes today's presentations, and now we can move on to the questions and discussion point of this meeting today. So if anyone has any questions, you can put them in the chat, or raise your hand or take yourself off mute, whatever you prefer. Leo, you have a question?
I do. I'm sorry to jump in. It's just I have a lot of admiration for what your 3 organizations are doing, and so much appreciation for this kind of work that, in my view, is what needs to be scaled out at this point, and very intensively. And so my question for all 3 of you is we as an educational program, very much within a university, are very worried on whether we're preparing students to have the knowledge and skills that are needed to support these projects, scale them out, and connect them with each other in networks that can grow. So in your experience, what are some of the knowledges and skills that you think students can learn more of in order to be able to better support you and support organizations like yours? Or should we be investing more of our educational effort and energy in to facilitate that?
Well, I think a lot of students I've met through our programming, at least here in Philadelphia, are interested in what we do specifically because they have an environmental background, and the knowledge they have in that realm, whether that is social justice, whether that is environmental justice, whether it's just biology itself, is pretty strong. I think what sometimes would help a lot of small nonprofits would be some business acumen. It doesn't have to be that they're a business major or anything, just a background in whether that's nonprofit management or just a small taste of what it means to have something business related in your background would certainly be helpful.
Go ahead, Monica.
Thank you, Dee Dee. I was going to say analytical thinking is, I think, a skill that many students could enhance. And when I say analytical thinking, I don't mean like within subject areas, but across disciplines. Because often what I see is people will focus on specific areas and indeed, become very smart at it. For example, creating data sets. But then there are the standard ways of accumulating information, and then there are alternative kinds of ways and information that people seek. And because it's easier to go with the traditional standard, already available data, that's often what we see. So I encourage students to go the different routes to find, what's not present. And that requires another level of analysis that I think sometimes it would be great to see more students have.
I agree with both Monica and Megan. And I also, I usually, if I'm talking to, students at an institution, really encouraging people, I don't know everything there is to know about climate, environmental justice. But what is helpful is working with people who don't mind engaging the community around these issues and talking about them in a way that resonates with people. So if there's, if there are ways to, I don't know, like include in curriculum or in a particular class, like community engagement, mobilizing, organizing is really helpful. Like a lot of, Megan mentioned it, like we work with very small, in Holly Grove Neighbors case, we don't have any staff. So everybody, the partnership with Piece by Piece sort of helps to staff the work. But even then, there are two of us on staff. So having folks who can help, who don't mind talking to, going into the neighborhood and talking to folks about climate in a way that is relatable. That's, I know in New Orleans, we could certainly benefit from those type of like human resources or student resources.
Thank all of you for your answer.
Does any students have any questions?
I have a question, or just kind of a comment. First of all, thank you all so much for talking. It's been really inspiring to hear about your work. I had a question for Dee Dee, but anyone could kind of also talk about it. I like what you're talking about, that when you're taking a lot in New Orleans, it's used both for farming and for climate change mitigation. So it's feeding the community, but also trying to enhance or protect the land against future environmental, damages from weather or storms. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more to what that looks like, what the process is, how you're kind of finding lots, what the process of transformation has been like, what the challenges and successes are in that work.
Thank you for that question. Lots of challenges. I'll give you one example that has less to do with environment, but these are things we have to think about when we're installing or building beds on these properties. So we lease, the New Orleans Redevelopment Authority owns the many vacant lots in New Orleans. And because property values are skyrocketing, lots that after Hurricane Katrina, there was basically a land grab. People were, developers were coming in the city and purchasing lots of land for $3,000 and $4,000. The property that we recently was recently donated to Holly Grove Neighbors. That property, because we of the timing in terms of assessment, we were locked into a price. So we were able to, the property was a little less than $20,000. That property today, that was in 2017 or 18. That property today might be worth double, if not triple, that price. So there's the issue around the cost of these properties, and these are not developed properties. These are vacant lots that we have raised beds. We have raised beds on these properties. We're also, Anthropocene Alliance is helping us think about like even more how to install, make them greener than they are, I'll say. So we've talked about like how to install rain gardens on the properties. But some of the things that we have dealt with these properties include, like we had picnic benches and tables donated or made for us and donated to the property. They stayed there about 2 years before they started walking away. I mentioned the community fridge program, like that is a specific request from folks who live in the neighborhood. Other neighbors have said to me, Dee Dee, I wouldn't do that if I were you. Like I wouldn't put a refrigerator on the property because it probably won't stay there, or at least, you know, if it's solar, the battery may leave. So we've had to think about like, how do we create these installations that really, we feel like we're certain will benefit the neighborhood, but we have to secure them in a way that like it's gonna take a little bit of creativity. We had another situation where a developer, we were under the impression we had a parcel of land that was, I don't know, about 60 by maybe 224 feet or something like that. Well, one day the grower goes, this was in the last few months, the grower goes to the property and all of our beds have been removed from the property. It's clean. And when I contacted the city, because this is a property we're leasing, I contact the city and say, hey, this is what's happened. They basically put the onus on us as the lessee, like to figure out who owns the property, who the developer could be. So now on that parcel, which it's actually 2 parcels, not one, they're building a house. And so we were in the middle of rebuilding our garden, and the grower is like, we can't do this next to a construction site. It's going to interfere with the bed. So just having to rethink, like, how do we use that property that we're paying for? So I'm rambling, but these are some of the issues. Even, you know, with a hurricane like Ida, you have damaged beds, you have, you know, tree limbs on property. So these are the considerations that we that always have to be on top as we're doing this work. And it's community space. So you want the community to interact with it, but in a productive and a healthy way. So again, we have to think creatively about, you know, when we're installing things, like how do we secure them to the point that, you know, they can't get up and walk away from the property. But all of our properties as of right now, except the one I just mentioned that was cleared by a developer who I've yet to identify, we have raised beds on them, but we're thinking about, again, some of the stuff I mentioned in my presentation, like installing echo benches, putting a community fridge on one of the properties, a solar powered community fridge. So those are things that when I talk about scaling up, like those are things we need help with. Like how do we, because we do want to create a model. We want to be able to duplicate or replicate this type of programming in neighborhoods across the city. So how do we do that? How do we create these spaces that really do benefit the community? But every year we're not having to reinvent it because of a hurricane or because someone has removed an installation from the property. I hope that answers or at least gets at your question in a meaningful way.
Thank you, Dee Dee and Joshua. Does anyone else have some questions? We have 10 minutes left. If no one's gonna go, I have a question. So I guess Monica and Dee Dee, now that y'all gotten maybe more connected to each other, y'all interact within the coalition, and then here today, and y'all got to see each other's presentations. Where do y'all see y'all's work connecting and diverging, given y'all's different geography, and maybe particular focuses?
I'll go ahead. I'd like to again express appreciation for seeing the work of my environmental colleagues. And as Dee Dee, as you're sharing your experience, I can only say, and thank you for this question, Sabrina. I can only say, oh yeah, I feel that story. I can definitely relate. The Heritage Garden that I mentioned is a public space. It's basically being transformed into a public park. And, we planted, for example, 22 orchard trees, 22 cherry trees, pear trees, plum trees, And unfortunately, the reason why it's a restoration project is because we had a landscape contractor come through and kill all the trees. We've had to start all over again, but it's a sacred site. It's not going to stop us. We'll do it again. But also, we want to enhance it and make it something that's more permanent. But also in the work that I've been doing around the state, and especially having the keen eye, having worked with inland stewardship and doing land counseling for so many years, one of the things that I've recognized, especially hearing Megan's comment about her property being situated on basically a railroad yard, and also being engaged with food policy councils, in years past, and watching people who do a lot of box gardening because of the soil challenges. It's one of the reasons, that feeds my interest to do this work in soil restoration, because, container gardening is wonderful. I have several in my own backyard, but it is not, it needs to expand to make sure that the soil under it is also rehabilitated, because what I'm finding, especially again, working in environmental justice around the state, and even looking for property around the state, and not only in Virginia, but in other places, like you said, first of all, the developers are a serious threat to land. And then also, there are so many, we think of only certain industrial sites and brownfields as places that are contaminated, but we know that in impacted communities, we have some serious issues that we need to address. And so I'll stop there, but yeah, thanks so much for sharing. Our stories are all very similar.
Yeah, I agree. Before today, I was thinking I need to email Monica and see when we can we can have a conversation, because it sounds like you've done a lot of what we're working to do. And again, Holly Grove Neighbors most of the board are retirees, and they rely heavily on the organizational support that Piece by Piece can give. So it's a lot of, us getting with community to the extent that we can, and seeing, how do we protect these properties? How do we acquire more properties? How do we use them for the benefit of the neighborhood instead of a developer that's only interested in extracting from the neighborhood? So thank you all. I appreciate hearing about your work, and I look forward to us collaborating even more deeply.
Thank you, Dee Dee and Monica. And thank you all for students and whoever has joined us today on this Zoom call, this Zoom meeting. If y'all are interested in any of these 3 various projects, please get connected to Leo, I, or Dee Dee, Monica, Megan. Feel like it's not a bother, just send us an email. I'll put my email in the chat. Leo, I'm sure y'all have Leo's email, but Leo can put his email in the chat as well. And yeah, if you have any questions regarding the program, the workforce with this work, I'm also open to that. Yeah, so thank y'all so much for being here. And I guess this concludes the presentation today. Leo, if you want to say any last words.
Yeah, I must jump in and give a big thanks to Dee Dee, Monica, and Megan, not just for joining us, but for all the work you do. I know it's a heavy lift. I know it's a major effort, and it's a community effort. And I am very hopeful that the kind of projects that you all run are sort of the basis and the groundwork for the kind of world that we're building as things get tougher and tougher, right? And so I had a bunch of questions about the SWORD projects, and I'll follow up. And we will share this recording with our community. It is a very tough time of the semester for everyone. Everyone has their finals due, and faculty and everyone. I know a lot of people wanted to also join live, but once this is shared, I'm pretty sure others will follow up, wanting to learn more about this, and hopefully we can stay connected, not just because of these collaborations, because the content of your work is also a lot of learning experience to be shared with new cohorts that come up in future time. So a great appreciation and thanks. And thanks, Sabrina, a lot for making this possible.
Sure, you're welcome. Thank y'all. And goodbye. Have a good rest of the day or season or time. Bye.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you all. We appreciate it.
Have a great one.